This morning, our reading is from Luke 19, verses 35 through 38, and it's printed in your order of service, and there is a part for you to read in bold. When we come to that part, anyone with a palm, we encourage you to wave your palm as those who were gathered there as Jesus processed down the hill to Jerusalem. Listen and hear God's word. They brought the colt to Jesus, and after throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. As he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. As he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. On this morning, Palm Sunday, as we wave palms, remembering Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, we also are invited into the scenes into which he rides. Through gospel readings and through reflections from the Iona community, we are invited this morning to stay awake, to watch and pray with Jesus through this coming Holy Week. A reading from Luke 19:41 through 46. As Jesus came near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "If you, even you, had only recognized on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Indeed, the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up ramparts around you and surround you and hem you in on every side. They will crush you to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave within you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation from God." Then he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling things there. And he said, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer,' but you have made it a den of robbers."
It was on the Monday that religion got in the way. An outsider would have thought that it was a pet shop fire sale, and the outsider, in some ways, wouldn't have been far wrong. Only it wasn't household pets. It was pigeons that were being purchased. And it wasn't a fire sale. It was a rip-off stall in a holy temple, bartering birds for sacrifice. And the price was something only the rich could afford. No discounts to students, seniors, or those living on welfare. Then Jesus, the holiest man on earth, went through the bizarre bazaar, like a bull in a china shop. So the doves got liberated, and the pigeon sellers got angry, and the police went crazy, and the poor people clapped like mad, because he was making a sign that God was for everybody, not just for those who could afford him. Jesus turned the tables on Monday, the day that religion got in the way.
Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore do whatever they teach you and follow it. But do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. For you do not go in yourselves, and when others are trying to go in, you stop them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they are full of bones of the dead and all kinds of filth.
It was on the Tuesday that he let them have it. If you had been there, you would have thought that a union official was being taken to task by a group of mobsters, or that the chair of a multinational corporation was being interrogated by left-wing activists posing as shareholders. They wanted to know why. They wanted to know how. They were the respectable men, the influential men, the establishment. The questions they asked ranged from silly schoolyard speculations about whether you would be a bigamist in heaven if you married twice on earth, to what was the central rule of civilized behavior. They knew the answers already, or so they thought. Otherwise, they never would have asked the questions. And like most of us, they were looking for an argument with no intention of change of heart. So Jesus flailed them with his tongue. Those who were too tired and to look interested, but never wanted to be committed. And that was on the Tuesday, the day when Jesus let them have it.
It was 2 days before the Passover. While Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at a table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard. And she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was this ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me, for you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her.
It was on the Wednesday that they called Jesus a wasteful person. The place smelled like the perfume department of a big store. It was as if somebody had bumped an elbow against a bottle and sent it crashing to the floor, setting off the most expensive stink bomb on earth. But it happened in a house, not a shop. And the woman who broke the bottle was no casual afternoon shopper. She was the poorest of the poor, giving away the only precious thing she had. And Jesus sat still while she poured the liquid over his head, as unnecessary as aftershave on a full crop of hair and a bearded chin. And those who smelled it, and those who saw it, and those who remembered that he was against extravagance, called him a wasteful person. They forgot that he was also the poorest of the poor. And they who had much and who had given him nothing objected to a pauper giving him everything. Jealousy was in the air when a poor woman's generosity became an embarrassment to their tight-fistedness. That was on the Wednesday when they called Jesus a wasteful person.
Jesus said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and they conspired to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people." Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him.
It was on the Thursday that he became valuable. Jesus hadn't anything to sell, not since leaving his hammer and saw 3 years earlier. Needless to say, he could still build a set of trestles or hang a couple of shelves at the drop of a hat, no bother at all. But he wasn't into making things, not now. He was into, well, talking, I suppose, and listening, and healing, and forgiving, and encouraging, all the things for which there's no pay and the job center has no advertisements. So his work wasn't worth much, nor indeed was he. For not being well-dressed or well-heeled or well-connected, he wouldn't have attracted many ticket holders had he been put in for raffle. But he had a novelty value, like a human oddity on display in the circus sideshow. Put him on a stage, and he might be interesting to look at. Sell him to the circus with the promise of some tricks, and there could be some money in it. It was on the Thursday that he became valuable.
The chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused Jesus of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answers? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now, at the festival, Pilate used to release a prisoner for them, anyone they asked for. Now, a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
It was on the Friday that they ended it all. Of course, they didn't do it one by one. They weren't brave enough. Throw all the stones together or throw none of them at all. They did it in crowds where you can feel safe and lose yourself and shout things you would never shout out on your own and do things you would never do if you felt the camera was watching you. It was a crowd in the church that did it, a crowd in the civil service that did it, a crowd in the streets that did it, a crowd on the hill that did it. And Jesus said nothing. He took the insults, the bruises, the spit on the face, the thongs on the back, the curses in the ears. He took the sight of his friends turning away, running away. And Jesus said nothing. Nothing. And he let them do their worst until their worst was done. As on Friday they ended it all and would have finished themselves had Jesus not cried, "Father, forgive them." It was on the Friday that they ended it all. And thus began God's revolution.
The next day, that is after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember that impostor, while he was still alive, said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead, and the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone.
It was on the Saturday that Jesus was not there. Those who don't like corpses can't stay away from graveyards unless there's some prohibition to stop them revisiting the dead ends of their hopes and dreams. It's as if they think that should the voice speak again, it will speak there, or a sunbeam will dance, or a flower will shoot and give a sign of misinterpreted life. But close the cemetery, or confine, through custom or constraint, the wailing ones to the house, and it looms larger. The loss, the lostness, the losers. Men shiver in an upstairs room, warm though the day is. Women weep in a distant circle. Memory is forced on memory. The mind's eye tries to trace the profile and the face, the smile, the gentle twitching of the nose, and fails. And a panic sets in because it seems Jesus can't be remembered. Was he ever known? It was on the Saturday that Jesus was not there.
Ride on, Jesus, ride on.